My mom found out my income, then showed up with my spoiled brother demanding I share the wealth. She regretted it fast. When my mom found out how much I make, she didn't call to say congratulations. She didn't send a card. She didn't even text. She showed up at my front door unannounced after 14 years of silence. She brought my half-brother Ethan, a boy I barely knew, and stood on my welcome mat with a smile that looked more like a demand. She wanted me to give her $4,000 a month because family helps family. My name is Daisy Miller. I'm 31 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, and I am a data engineer. And before I tell you how everything flipped and how I used the very skills that made me successful to protect myself, like and subscribe, and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. What my mother and brother didn't know was that my life's work wasn't just about building things. It was about tracking them. I track everything. Every login, every transaction, every digital footprint, every lie. So when they tried to corner me, to take what I had spent my entire life building, I didn't get angry. I didn't yell. I documented. And by the time it was over, they had both lost far more than just money. They had lost the one thing they thought they could always count on: my silence. I was 8 years old when my mother left. It wasn't a dramatic screaming fight that ended with a slammed door. It was quiet. It was the kind of Tuesday that felt like any other Tuesday until it wasn't. She told me she needed a better life. I didn't understand what that meant. Our life, from my 8-year-old perspective, seemed perfectly fine. We had a small house with a porch swing Dad had built, a patchy lawn that I helped mow, and we had spaghetti for dinner every Tuesday night. A better life felt like a criticism of the one I was living. That afternoon, she packed one large suitcase and a smaller duffel bag. I sat on the edge of my bed, my legs dangling, watching her fold her blouses with neat, precise movements. Her motions were efficient, detached. She wasn't crying. Her face was calm, set, like someone concentrating on a difficult but necessary task. I remember thinking that maybe a better life was a place you visited, like Disneyland, and that she would be back soon with souvenirs. I asked her, "Are you going on a trip?" She paused her folding, her back still to me. "Something like that, sweetie. When will you be back?" She didn't answer for a long moment. Then she turned, a strange, tight smile on her face. "I'll call you." She knelt in front of me. Her perfume, a heavy gardenia scent I used to love, suddenly felt suffocating. "I have to go, sweetie," she said. She kissed my forehead. Her lips were dry and cool. It wasn't the kind of kiss that meant "I love you." It was the kind of kiss that meant goodbye. Then she stood up, picked up her bags, and walked out the front door without another word. I ran to the living room window, pressing my face against the cool glass. I watched her get into a shiny blue car I had never seen before. A man I didn't recognize was in the driver's seat. She got in and the car pulled away from the curb. She didn't look back at the house. Not once. The silence she left behind was a physical thing. It wasn't just the absence of her voice. It was a heavy presence that filled up the corners of every room. For the first few days, I kept expecting to hear her keys in the lock. I'd wake up in the morning and listen for the sound of the coffee maker, a sound that never came. Dad tried his best. He made me burnt toast for breakfast and lopsided sandwiches for lunch. In the evenings, we'd sit at the kitchen table, the silence between us so thick I felt like I could touch it. Dad and I were left with a stack of overdue bills on the kitchen counter, a slow drip coming from the ceiling in the hallway, and that heavy, thick silence that lasted for 14 years. He tried to shield me from the worst of it, but kids notice things. I noticed the worry lines deepening around his eyes. I noticed him eating smaller portions at dinner so I could have more. I noticed him studying the bills at night, his shoulders slumped in defeat. While she was starting over, building a new family with a man named Victor Grant, my dad was trying to hold our broken world together. He picked up extra shifts at the diner where he worked as a short-order cook. He'd come home smelling of grease and burnt coffee, his face etched with a tiredness that seemed to sink right into his bones. He never once complained to me, not when the car broke down and he had to bike 5 miles to work for a week. Not when the water heater gave out and we had to take cold showers in the middle of winter. Not when I needed new shoes and he had to work a double on Christmas Eve to afford them. He would sit with me at the kitchen table while I did my homework, his eyes heavy but his presence a steady, comforting anchor in my chaotic little world. He was the one who taught me how to ride a bike, patiently running behind me, holding the seat until I found my balance. He was the one who tried, and failed spectacularly, to braid my hair for school pictures. He was the one who sat through every parent-teacher conference, his work clothes still smelling faintly of onions, listening intently and nodding, always telling my teachers how proud he was of me. He taught me practical things because he knew he had to be both parents. He showed me how to check the oil in a car, how to change a tire, and how to balance a checkbook long before any other kid my age knew what one was. He'd spread the bills out on the table under the dim kitchen light, a ritual of survival. "This is what we have, Daisy," he'd say, his voice low and serious, pointing to his paycheck. "And this is what we owe. You always have to know where your money is going. You can't let it control you." It wasn't just a lesson in budgeting. It was a lesson in reality, in control. He was showing me the architecture of our survival, and in doing so, he was giving me the blueprint to build my own. He had 2 rules that he repeated so often they became part of my DNA. The first was, "Money shows who people really are, Daisy. It doesn't make them good or bad. It just makes them more of what they already were." He'd say it while counting the meager tips from his jar, separating the quarters from the dimes. I think it was his way of processing what my mother had done. She hadn't become a different person. The money her new husband offered had simply revealed the person she had been all along. The second was, "Keep your receipts, in life and in cash." He had an old shoebox where he kept every important piece of paper, the receipt for the new tires, the warranty for the toaster, the bill from the plumber who fixed the leaky roof. He told me it was proof. Proof of what you paid for, proof of what you owned, proof of where you'd been. He was teaching me to create a paper trail, a defensible record of my life. I didn't understand then that he was giving me the very tools I would one day need to protect myself from the woman who had left us with nothing but debt and silence. About a year after she left, a letter arrived. It had a fancy embossed return address. My hands shook as I gave it to Dad. He opened it, read it silently, and his face hardened. He handed it to me. The letter wasn't an apology. It was a justification. She wrote about her new life, her travels, her happiness. She said she hoped I would understand one day that she had to be a little selfish to find her own happiness. The word felt like a slap. There was no "I miss you," no "how are you," just a neat, tidy explanation for her abandonment. I tore the letter into 1,000 tiny pieces and threw them in the trash. That was the last time I cried for her. That day, something inside me shifted. The soft, hopeful heart of an 8-year-old girl began to harden, plating itself with a quiet, resilient kind of armor. Her absence became a normal part of my life, a hollow spot in our 2-person family. Dad and I built a life on what we had, not on what we had lost. It was a small life, a quiet one, held together by pancakes, hard work, and the silent understanding that we were all each other had. The ghost of my mother, and the better life she had chosen, was a story that belonged to someone else. By the time I was 15, survival wasn't just a concept Dad talked about. It was my part-time job. While other kids were going to football games or the mall on weekends, I was tying on a stained, greasy apron at the same diner where Dad flipped pancakes. My first job was mopping the sticky floors, the smell of stale coffee and bleach clinging to my clothes long after my shift ended. I graduated to refilling salt shakers and then eventually to waiting tables. The work was grueling. I dealt with rude customers, crying babies, and the constant pressure of keeping orders straight. The pay was barely anything, just a handful of crumpled bills and loose change at the end of a long night. But every single dollar felt like a victory. Every dollar was another brick in the wall I was building around myself and Dad, a fortress of self-reliance. I learned to be resourceful because I had no other choice. I became a master of finding the hustle, of turning time into money. After my shift at the diner, I would go to the public library, not to hang out with friends, but to tutor middle schoolers in algebra and history. I'd sit with them in the quiet study rooms, patiently explaining quadratic equations and the causes of the Civil War. I charged $10 an hour, cash, and it felt like a fortune. It was my money, earned by my brain, and it belonged only to me. On Sundays, my one day off from the diner, I'd turn my bedroom into a tiny workshop. I made beaded bracelets and intricate wire-wrapped necklaces, teaching myself from free tutorials I found online. I took pictures of them with an old digital camera and sold them on a new website called Etsy. I taught myself basic HTML to make my online shop look more professional than a teenager's hobby. Each sale notification that popped up on my email was a small thrill, a confirmation. It wasn't just $10 or $20. It was evidence. It was proof that I could create value out of thin air, that I didn't need anyone to give me anything. I could make it myself. Dad called it survival. I called it my education. High school was just the place I went between jobs. I took extra classes online, loaded up on AP courses, and tested out of any electives that seemed like a waste of time. I didn't have the luxury of exploring my interests. My only interest was creating a future where I wouldn't have to live in constant fear of a broken-down car or an unexpected medical bill. I missed school dances, football games, and lazy weekends with friends. My focus was a laser beam pointed at one thing: getting out. I graduated 6 months early, at the top of my class, with a full-ride academic scholarship to the University of Texas for computer science. The day I got the acceptance letter, Dad hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe, and for the first time in a long time, I saw him cry. They were tears of pride and I think relief. He knew I had built my own way out. College was a different kind of struggle, a lonely one. The scholarship covered tuition, but nothing else. Books, food, housing, that was all on me. I got a work-study job in the university's IT department, troubleshooting professors' laptop issues and resetting student passwords. I always took the late shift, from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. because it was quieter and paid a little extra. The computer lab became my second home, a sanctuary of humming servers and quiet concentration. Many nights, dinner was a packet of instant ramen cooked in a coffee pot in my dorm room, the salty steam fogging up my glasses as I stared at lines of code on my screen. I was always tired. A deep, persistent exhaustion settled into my body, a constant companion. But I didn't mind it. The fatigue was a sign that I was working, that I was moving forward. Every tired morning felt like progress. I poured every ounce of my being into my studies, particularly data engineering. I fell in love with the logic, the order, the clean certainty of it all. In a world that had proven to be chaotic and emotionally unpredictable, code was pure. It followed rules. An if-then statement always did what it was supposed to do. Data told stories, and if you knew how to listen, how to structure your queries, you could find the absolute truth hidden in the numbers. It was a world of receipts, just like Dad had taught me, but digital and infinitely more powerful. Every action left a trace. Every choice had a record. It was the safest, most logical place I had ever been. A world where I could build systems that were fair and predictable. The 4 years of college were a blur of late-night coding sessions, skipped meals, and the constant low-grade anxiety of a bank account that never had more than 2 digits in it. I never went on spring break to South Padre Island with the other students. I never went to a single frat party. My life was a closed loop. Class, work, study, sleep, repeat. When I graduated, I had a 4.0 GPA, a portfolio of projects, and 3 job offers. I took the one that paid the most, at a fast-growing tech firm in downtown Austin. My starting salary was more money than Dad had ever made in a single year. The first time I saw that number on my official offer letter, I locked myself in a bathroom stall and cried until I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just relief. It was the feeling of a heavy weight, a burden I had been carrying on my small shoulders since I was 8 years old, finally being lifted. I worked relentlessly. I saved aggressively. For the first few years, I lived like a broke college student, even though my bank account was growing steadily. I drove a 10-year-old car until the engine gave out. I furnished my small rented apartment with secondhand furniture from thrift stores. I funneled every spare dollar into investments and high-yield savings accounts. I was building a fortress, brick by financial brick, to ensure that no one, not a landlord, not a boss, not a ghost from the past, could ever pull the rug out from under me again. The day I turned 30, I closed on my own condo. It was a corner unit on the 17th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire glittering expanse of the city. The day I moved in, I stood in the empty living room, sunlight streaming in across the polished floors, and I felt a sense of profound peace I had never known. This was mine. I had built this. Not just the condo, but the life that came with it. My next move, and the one that mattered most, was for Dad. I found a beautiful little retirement cottage near Lake Travis, with a small garden where he could plant tomatoes and a wide porch where he could sit and read for hours. When I took him to see it, he walked through the rooms silently, running his hand along the clean countertops and looking out the big picture window at the oak trees. He was a proud man, and I knew accepting it would be hard for him. We sat on the porch and I laid out the finances. I showed him that it was taken care of, that my own future was secure, and that this was not a burden but a gift. A thank you? He turned to me, his eyes wet with tears he refused to let fall. Daisy, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You did all this. We did it, I corrected him gently. You worked your whole life for me. It's my turn to let you rest. He finally retired. He spent his days fishing on the lake, working in his garden, and taking naps in his favorite armchair. The deep lines of exhaustion on his face began to soften. He was happy. He was safe. Our lives were finally stable, secure, peaceful. My mother was a ghost, a faded photograph from a life that no longer existed. She was a story I sometimes told myself to remember how far I'd come, but she had no place in my present, until the day the buzzer rang and the ghost walked right up to my door. It was a Friday evening in late October, the kind of night that felt like a reward at the end of a long week. A cool, gentle rain was tapping a soothing rhythm against the glass of my balcony doors. Far below, the city lights of Austin blurred into a soft, glittering tapestry. I was in my element, my sanctuary, curled up on my sofa, laptop warm on my legs. I was deep in a coding sprint, untangling a complex data migration issue for a project deadline. I had a cup of peppermint tea steaming on the coaster beside me, instrumental music playing softly from a speaker in the corner, and the satisfying rhythmic click of my keyboard was the only sound in the room. This quiet, this control, this peace, this was the life I had meticulously, exhaustingly, built for myself. Then, the intercom buzzer let out a sharp, jarring shriek that sliced through the calm. It was a sound of intrusion, of the outside world demanding entry into my carefully constructed fortress. I frowned, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 8 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. My dad, my only regular visitor, always called first. My few close friends knew better than to interrupt a Friday night coding session. It had to be a delivery driver with the wrong address, someone who had just buzzed the first name they saw. I pressed the talk button on the wall-mounted panel, my voice laced with mild annoyance. "Hello?" A woman's voice, tinny and distorted through the cheap speaker, crackled in response. "Daisy? It's your mother." The words didn't compute. My brain simply refused to process them. It felt like a glitch in the system, a line of bad code. My mother. It was a title, a word, but it wasn't connected to a person I knew, not anymore. I stood frozen for a full 10 seconds, the silence stretching out, my mind racing to place the voice, to make sense of the impossible claim. It had to be a prank call, a cruel mistake. "It's Marie," the voice said, an edge of impatience creeping in this time. "Let me up." Marie. The name hit me like a physical shock, a jolt of electricity. My blood went cold, and a strange, hollow feeling opened up in my stomach. I slowly stood up, my legs feeling unsteady, as if they belonged to someone else. I walked to the intercom's video screen and pressed the button. The small, grainy black and white image flickered to life, showing two figures huddled under the building's brightly lit awning, trying to shield themselves from the drizzle. A woman with perfectly styled, shoulder-length hair, and a tall, lanky young man beside her, his shoulders hunched. It was her. Older, more polished, but unmistakably her. My finger hovered over the door open button. 1,000 thoughts crashed through my mind. I could say no. I could say she had the wrong apartment. I could just not answer. But I didn't. Some morbid curiosity, some deeply buried 8-year-old part of me that I thought had died long ago, took over. I pressed the button. I heard the click of the lobby door unlocking through the speaker. The elevator ride up to the 17th floor felt like an eternity. With each ascending number on the digital display, my anxiety grew, coiling tighter in my chest. I stood at my front door, my hand hovering over the heavy steel doorknob, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. What did she want? After 14 years of absolute silence, what could possibly bring her here? The logical part of my brain, the data engineer, told me there was a reason, a motive. People like her didn't act without a purpose that served themselves. When the knock finally came, it was soft but firm, a sound of polite, unearned confidence. I took a deep, shuddering breath, turned the lock, and opened the door. And there she was, Marie Grant. She looked nothing like the worn-out photo I kept in a box in my closet. This woman was a stranger, sculpted by money and time. She wore a stylish beige trench coat that I knew instinctively was real Burberry. Her hair was a shade of blonde that cost a fortune to maintain. She carried an expensive leather purse that probably cost more than my first car. Her smile was bright, white, and completely artificial. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, scanning me from head to toe, then flicking past me to assess the apartment behind me. Behind her stood the young man from the video screen. He had to be Ethan, my half-brother. He was maybe 19, with the bored, entitled look of a kid who had never had to work for anything in his life. He wore pristine white designer sneakers, a brand-name hoodie, and an expression of profound indifference. He was staring past me, into my home, with an undisguised smirk. "Daisy," Marie said, her voice overly bright, a performance of motherly affection. She stepped forward, arms open for a hug. I instinctively took a small step back, a reflexive, defensive motion I couldn't control. She didn't miss it. Her arms dropped to her sides, and her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered, the mask snapping back into place. "My, look at you. You look successful." The word hung in the air, sounding more like an accusation than a compliment. She breezed past me into the foyer without waiting for an invitation, her eyes darting around, taking in the high ceilings, the polished hardwood floors, the sweeping view from the floor-to-ceiling windows. I felt a hot wave of anger and violation wash over me. She was pricing my life, and I was just an obstacle in her view. Ethan shuffled in behind her, his expensive sneakers silent on the wood, looking around with a dismissive air, as if it was all a little less impressive than he'd been led to believe. "This is a very nice place," Marie said, running a manicured ruby-red finger along the cool marble of my kitchen island. "You've done very well for yourself. Victor and I are so proud." "What are you doing here, Marie?" I asked. I didn't call her mom. She hadn't earned that title. My voice was flat, cold, devoid of any warmth. I wasn't giving her an inch of ground. She finally turned to face me, her cheerful mask dropping away to reveal the true purpose of her visit. The bright smile was gone, replaced by a look of serious, almost rehearsed concern. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. "Honey, we need to talk," she began, her voice low and intimate, as if we were sharing a secret. "It's about family. It's about Ethan." I just stared at her, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. She took my silence as an invitation to continue her pre-written script. "Ethan is in college now. A very good school, a private university. It's what's best for his future. But the tuition is just outrageous. $58,000 a year. It's a lot for us to handle right now, what with the economy and Victor's business." She paused, letting the number hang in the air between us, a carefully deployed bomb. "And since you're doing so well, so obviously successful," she gestured around my living room, "I thought you could help out, contribute." I couldn't believe the audacity. It was so direct, so transactional. "Contribute?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes," she said, nodding, as if it were the most reasonable, logical request in the world. "We were thinking you could help with his expenses. Just a small amount to help your brother, to help your family. Say $4,000 a month." My brain stuttered to a halt. $4,000 a month. The number was absurd. It was more than the mortgage on Dad's cottage. It was more than I had managed to live on for entire years of my life, scraping by on ramen and sheer will. Before I could even form a response, before I could articulate the rage and betrayal that was choking me, Ethan chimed in from the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, scrolling idly on his phone, the picture of casual disrespect. He didn't even bother to look up. "Yeah, sis, you've got all this money. Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word, that specific word, hit me like a physical blow. It was a ghost from the past, the exact same word she had used in that one solitary letter to justify her abandonment. She had to be a little selfish to find her happiness. And now her son, this stranger who shared half her DNA, was using that same word as a weapon to pry open my wallet. In that single, devastating moment, any lingering microscopic flicker of hope, any remnant of the 8-year-old girl who waited by the window for a car that never returned, finally and completely died. I wasn't her daughter. I was a resource. I was an untapped asset she had just rediscovered. I looked at her polished, calculating face and his entitled, bored smirk, and I saw them for exactly what they were. They weren't family. They were prospectors who had just struck gold. Against my better judgment, against every screaming instinct in my body, I agreed to meet them the next morning. A small, traitorous part of me needed to see this through to its conclusion in a public place, on neutral ground, where I couldn't be cornered and overwhelmed in my own home. I told myself it was about gathering information, about understanding the full scope of their delusion. But the truth, the ugly, persistent truth, was that I was giving her one last chance, one final opportunity to be a mother, to say something, anything, that sounded like she cared about the human being I had become, and not just the balance in my bank account. It was a foolish, childish hope, and I knew it, but it was there, flickering like a dying ember. I chose the location, a busy, noisy cafe downtown, the kind with overpriced pastries displayed under glass and the constant, loud hiss of an espresso machine. The air smelled of burnt coffee and sugar. It was impersonal and loud, a perfect place to have a conversation you didn't want to have. I got there 15 minutes early and chose a small table in the corner, a defensive position with my back to the wall and a clear view of the entrance. I needed to see them before they saw me. While I waited, I watched the other people in the cafe, a young couple sharing a croissant, laughing. A father patiently helping his little girl with her shoelaces. A group of friends catching up, their faces open and happy. It was a parade of normal, easy affection, and it felt like a broadcast from another planet. Each laugh, each shared glance was a stark reminder of what I never had. It sharpened the edges of my resolve. They arrived 10 minutes late, a power move I recognized immediately. My mother, Marie, swept in as if she were entering a ballroom, wearing a chic white pantsuit and oversized designer sunglasses that she didn't remove. She radiated an aura of importance, expecting people to notice her. Ethan trailed behind her, headphones around his neck, looking profoundly bored with the entire world. He was a caricature of teenage apathy. Marie scanned the room, her eyes finding me. She bestowed a dazzling, celebrity-like smile, as if we were old friends meeting for a joyful reunion brunch, a performance for the benefit of any strangers who might be watching. "Daisy, darling," she said, her voice loud enough for the tables around us to hear. She sat down opposite me, placing her expensive purse on the empty chair beside her as if reserving it for someone important. The traffic was simply dreadful. "It seems everyone in Austin has forgotten how to drive." Ethan slumped into his chair, immediately pulled out his phone and began scrolling, effectively vanishing from the conversation before it even began. The waitress, a young woman with tired eyes, came to take our order. Mom ordered the most expensive specialty latte on the menu, a concoction with lavender and oat milk, without even glancing at the price. Ethan asked for an iced coffee with 3 shots of espresso and a complicated list of syrups and foams. I just ordered a black coffee. Simple, direct, uncomplicated. Once the waitress left, Mom removed her sunglasses, folded them precisely, and placed them on the table. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a confidential, conspiratorial tone. "I'm so glad we're doing this," she started, her expression a mask of sincerity. "It's so important for families to communicate, to stay connected. So much lost time to make up for." She then launched into a long, rambling monologue. It was a masterclass in manipulation, a carefully woven tapestry of guilt, flattery, and insidious entitlement. She talked about the unbreakable bond between a mother and a daughter, as if it were a universal law that applied to us despite all evidence to the contrary. She mentioned how proud she was of my incredible success, framing it as a direct reflection of the good genes and strong will she had passed down to me. She was taking credit for a harvest she had never planted. Then seamlessly she pivoted. She spoke of the crushing weight of responsibility, the enormous sacrifices she and her husband, Victor, were making to give Ethan the best possible start in life. She painted a picture of herself as a selfless matriarch, struggling against the tide for her children. "A family is a team." "Daisy," she said, her eyes wide and earnest, searching mine for agreement. "And on any team, the stronger players have a duty to help the ones who are still finding their footing. It's not a handout, it's a responsibility. It's simply what successful, good-hearted daughters do. They give back to the family that raised them." The words almost made me laugh out loud. The family that raised me? The audacity was breathtaking. She had no idea about the burnt dinners, the worn-out shoes I'd stuffed with newspaper, the lonely nights I spent doing homework at the kitchen table while Dad snored in his armchair, too exhausted to make it to his own bed. Ethan, sensing his cue, finally looked up from his phone. "For real," he mumbled, his voice flat. "My dorm is so basic. The Wi-Fi is slow, and the cafeteria food is actual trash. All my friends have their own apartments off campus with, pools and stuff. I deserve better. Deserve." There was that word again. It hung in the air between us, heavy and ugly. He didn't say he wanted better, or he was working toward better. He said he deserved it, as if the world owed him a life of comfort simply for existing. Mom nodded sympathetically at him, a perfect portrait of a doting mother, then turned her focus back to me. Her smile was sweet, almost syrupy. "We're not asking for a handout, honey. Please don't see it that way. Think of it as an investment in your brother's future, an investment in the family's future. We could even make it automatic, so you don't have to think about it. You're so busy, I'm sure. A simple monthly bank transfer would be easiest for everyone. Automatic, like a subscription service, like a utility bill, like payroll." In that instant, I saw my future in her eyes. It was a column in her budget spreadsheet. I wasn't her long-lost daughter. I was her retirement plan. I was Ethan's perpetual trust fund. I was an annuity she had abandoned years ago and had only just remembered she owned. The waitress delivered our drinks, placing them carefully on the table. I wrapped my cold hands around the warm ceramic mug of my black coffee, the last foolish flicker of hope I'd been holding on to, the one that whispered, "Maybe she's changed," finally extinguished, leaving nothing but cold ash. There was nothing here to salvage, No relationship to rebuild. She hadn't come back for me. She had come back for what I had. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It tasted bitter. I carefully placed the mug back on its saucer, and the small, sharp click of ceramic on ceramic seemed to echo in the space between us. I looked my mother directly in the eye, my gaze unwavering. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was as hard and solid as granite. It cut through the noise of the cafe with absolute finality. Her smile tightened at the edges, a small, almost imperceptible crack in her flawless facade. "No, what do you mean, no?" "I mean, no," I repeated, keeping my voice calm and even, draining it of all emotion. "I will not be giving you $4,000 a month. I will not be giving you any money at all." I took a breath. I built this life. I built it with my own 2 hands, with my own mind, on my own time. You were not here for any of it. You don't get to show up 14 years later and invoice me for existing. The smile completely vanished from her face. It was like a mask had been ripped away, revealing the cold, hard contempt underneath. The woman sitting across from me was a stranger, and her eyes were filled with a venomous rage. "You've changed," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "You used to be such a sweet, grateful little girl. This money has made you hard. It's made you selfish." I picked up my purse and stood up from the table, my movements deliberate and slow. I looked down at her, at this woman who gave birth to me but never raised me, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing but a distant, clinical pity. "No," I said, my voice clear and steady, loud enough for her and Ethan to hear perfectly. "I haven't changed. I just stopped begging for scraps." I left them sitting there, stunned and silent, with their expensive coffees and their shattered expectations. I walked out of the cafe into the bright Austin sunlight and didn't look back. The air had never felt so clean. I knew this wasn't over. People like them don't just give up. They don't accept no. They escalate. And I knew, with a cold certainty, that I had to be ready for whatever was coming next. The 3 days that followed the cafe meeting were quiet, but it was a loud kind of quiet. It was the silence of a held breath, of waiting for the other shoe to drop. I knew people like my mother and Ethan didn't just accept defeat. Their entitlement was a force of nature, and when blocked, it wouldn't dissipate. It would find another, darker path. I didn't feel scared. I felt vigilant. My home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a perimeter I had to defend. My work, once a passion, now felt like a set of tools I needed to sharpen for a coming fight. I spent that weekend doing what I do best, a full-scale systems audit, but on my own life. I changed every password I had, replacing them with long, complex strings of randomly generated characters stored in an encrypted manager. I enabled 2-factor authentication on every account, from my bank to my social media to my email. I reviewed my credit reports line by line, looking for any inquiries or accounts I didn't recognize. I placed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus. It was a methodical, dispassionate process. I was treating my own life like a sensitive database, identifying vulnerabilities and patching them one by one. I was building a firewall. On Monday afternoon, the attack came. It wasn't a frontal assault, but a sneaky, insidious attempt to slip in through a back door I had long forgotten existed. I was at my desk at work, analyzing a data set, when a notification popped up on my secondary monitor. It was a security alert from my personal domain dashboard. Security flag. Suspicious login attempt detected on payroll portal. My heart didn't race. It went still and cold. I clicked on the alert. The dashboard showed me the details in clean, emotionless text. The attempt had occurred at 2:17 p.m. It had failed. The IP address originated from a residential network in a wealthy suburb of San Antonio, the city where I knew my mother and Victor Grant lived. But it was the method of the attack that made the breath catch in my throat. They hadn't tried to guess my current password. They had clicked the forgot password link. And for the recovery email, they had entered an address I hadn't used in over a decade, daisy.miller, 994var@hotmail.com. It was the first email address I ever had. My mother had set it up for me when I was 12 so I could join a virtual pet website. I hadn't accessed it in years. It was a digital fossil, a relic from a past I had walled off. My blood ran cold when I saw the next line in the security log. The password hint they had selected from the security questions was, "What is your little brother's birthday?" I had never set that question, but my payroll system, like many, used default security questions, and that one was on the list. But the fact that they chose it, the fact that they knew the answer, felt like a deliberate cruelty. The password hint was Ethan's birthday. My entire life, my entire financial security, hinged on a piece of trivia about a boy I didn't know, a boy who had replaced me. It was a stark, brutal reminder of my place in her world. I was secondary. My existence was a footnote to his. The login failed because after the correct security answer was entered, a final verification code was sent to my cell phone, a number they didn't have. My firewall had held, but they had crossed a line. This wasn't a desperate plea for help anymore. This wasn't a misguided attempt at family connection. This was a crime. This was an attempt to steal, to take by force what I would not give willingly. I leaned back in my chair, the office around me fading into a dull hum. The anger came then, but it wasn't hot and explosive. It was a cold, quiet, calculating rage. She had used a piece of my childhood, a digital memory she herself had created for me, as a weapon to try and break into my adult life. I took out my phone. I didn't hesitate. I opened a new text message to the number she had contacted me from. Me. Someone just tried to access my payroll account using my old Hotmail address and Ethan's birthday as a security answer. I hit send. The 3 little dots indicating she was typing appeared almost instantly. Marie, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's a terrible accusation, me. It's not an accusation. It's a data point. The login attempt came from an IP address in San Antonio. The dots appeared and disappeared for a full minute. She was crafting her response, trying to find the right angle. Marie, Victor has been having computer trouble. Maybe it was a virus or something. You work in tech. You know how these things happen. The lie was so lazy, so insulting. I felt a surge of icy calm. I was done playing games. Me. A computer virus that knows my maiden name, my old email address, and my half-brother's birthday? The dots appeared again, faster this time. The pretense was dropping. Marie, you are being so cruel. After everything I did for you, you owe us. You have so much, and you refuse to share. A good daughter would help her family, not make these wild accusations. You owe us for raising you. The words flashed on my screen, a monument to her delusion. My fingers moved quickly, typing out the simple, undeniable truth. Me, you didn't raise me. Dad did. I sent the message. There was a long pause. No dots, just silence. Then a new message came through. It wasn't a defense or a justification. It was a threat. Marie, you'll regret shutting us out. Family always finds a way. I stared at the message, the words glowing on the screen. Family always finds a way. She was promising to keep trying. She was promising to escalate. And in that moment, I knew I had to do more than just defend. I had to end this. She had just given me a warning. I decided to take it as a declaration of war. A war I had no intention of losing. After her final threatening text, something inside me settled into a state of absolute clarity. The hurt and confusion were gone, replaced by a cold, hard purpose. She had declared war, and she was going to fight it with guilt, manipulation, and illegal activity. I would fight it with the tools I had spent my life mastering: logic, data, and an intimate understanding of digital systems. I wasn't an emotional, wounded daughter anymore. I was a data engineer, and this was a security problem. The goal was containment. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, the Austin skyline a silent witness, and I started to build my trap. The open laptop method mentioned in the outline felt sloppy, too reliant on chance. My mother was predictable. Her threat, family always finds a way, told me she would snoop, she would pry, she would look for any weakness. I knew from the payroll attempt that she was monitoring digital channels connected to my past. The key was my dad. His email, an old, barely secured Yahoo account, was a vulnerability. He rarely used it, but I knew my mother had the password from years ago. It was a likely avenue for her to gather information, so I decided to lay my bait there. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would construct a targeted phishing scam designed for an audience of one, my mother. First, I bought a domain name that was a close misspelling of my bank's official website. Instead of capitaltrustbank.com, I bought capitaltrstbank.com. It was a common phishing technique. Then, using my knowledge of web development, I cloned my bank's login page pixel for pixel. It was a perfect replica, indistinguishable from the real thing. But this version had a key difference. The backend didn't authenticate logins. It simply recorded them. It was a digital flytrap. Any username and password entered would be logged in a secure text file on my private server, along with the date, time, and the IP address of the user. Next, I crafted the bait, an email. I designed it to look like an official security alert from my bank. The subject line read, "Urgent. Unauthorized access detected on your joint account." The joint account part was the hook. I didn't have a joint account with my dad, but she wouldn't know that. She would see the word joint and her greed would override her caution. The body of the email was concise and alarming. "We have detected a suspicious login attempt on an account you share with Daisy Miller. For your protection, please log in immediately using the link below to verify your identity and review account activity." The link, of course, led to my fake website. The final step was to send the email to my dad's old, compromised Yahoo account. I called him first, of course. I explained that I was running a security test and that he should expect a strange email, which he should ignore completely. He didn't ask for details. He just said, "You do what you have to do, Daisy. I trust you." With everything in place, I sent the email. Then I set up an alert system. The moment someone visited my phishing site and submitted a login, I would receive an instant notification on my phone. I waited. For 2 full days, there was nothing. A part of me started to wonder if I had miscalculated, if she wouldn't be so foolish as to fall for such a classic trick. But I had underestimated the magnetic pull of her own entitlement. On the 3rd night, at 11:42 p.m., my phone buzzed with the alert. Server alert. Login submission, capitaltirstbank.com. I was at my computer in seconds. I pulled up the log file. There it was. An IP address. The same one from San Antonio that had tried to access my payroll. A timestamp. And the submitted credentials. The username was my father's old email address. The password was a combination of his name and his birth year. It was the same password he'd used for everything for 20 years. My mother had remembered it. I had her. But just having the credentials wasn't enough. I needed proof that she had used them with malicious intent. My trap had a second stage. Once a user logged in to my fake portal, they were redirected to a page that I had designed to look like a real bank account summary. It showed a single account, Decoy Savings. The balance was a carefully chosen number, large enough to be tempting, but not so large as to be unbelievable, 27,450.18. And next to it, I had placed a single irresistible button, Initiate Wire Transfer. I watched my server logs in real time. I could see her mouse moving on the fake page. I saw the cursor hover over the transfer button. And then I saw the click. She was actively trying to move the non-existent money. That was the final piece of evidence. That was intent. I let the session stay active for another 5 minutes, logging every click, every navigation attempt. Then I executed my final move. I took the complete log file, the IP address, the timestamp, the entered credentials, the record of the attempted transfer, and packaged it into a formal fraud report. I sent it directly to the real fraud department at my actual bank, the one whose website I had impersonated. My report was simple. I am a victim of a targeted phishing attack. The perpetrators attempted to gain access to my finances via this fraudulent method. All evidence from the perpetrator's IP address and actions are attached. I had built the trap, laid the bait, and watched the target walk right into it. Now, I had handed the evidence over to the authorities who could take it from here. I had used her own greed against her. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. It was my mother. She wasn't angry or defiant. She was sobbing, hysterical. The police came to the house. She cried, her voice choked with panic. "They had a warrant. They took Victor's computer? They're asking us questions about bank fraud. How could you do this to us?" "How could you?" I stood on my balcony, looking out at the calm, quiet city lights. I held the phone to my ear, and my voice was perfectly steady, without a trace of anger or triumph. It was just the simple, cold, unassailable truth. "How could you?" I said calmly. "You tried to steal from your own child." She hung up. I blocked the number and went back inside. The war was over. I had won. The fallout was swift and methodical, much like the trap I had set. With the clean, undeniable digital evidence I provided, the bank's fraud department and the local police had everything they needed. The investigation was not a messy, he said, she said affair. It was a simple matter of following the data trail. The IP address was registered to my mother's husband, Victor Grant. The login attempts on my payroll portal and the actions on my phishing site originated from a laptop on his home network. The text messages provided clear evidence of motive and intent, culminating in a direct threat. It was an open and shut case of attempted identity theft and wire fraud. My mother and Victor were brought in for questioning. I learned later, through the official channels, that she tried to lie at first. She blamed a virus, then a hacker, then claimed her computer had been stolen and returned. But the evidence was too strong. The final nail in her coffin was the information they pulled from Ethan's laptop, which he had apparently used for the payroll attempt. Browser history showed searches for how to find someone's salary online and accessing employee payroll portals. He had been her willing accomplice. I was faced with a choice: Let the authorities proceed with a warning or press charges. For me, it wasn't a choice at all. This was never about revenge. I didn't want to see my mother in jail, but I needed peace. I needed a legally binding guarantee that this would never happen again. A warning wouldn't be enough. She would see it as a victory, a sign that she could try again later, more carefully. Pressing charges was the only way to build a permanent, uncrossable boundary. It was the ultimate receipt, proof of the transaction that had finally ended our relationship. So I did it. I signed the papers and agreed to testify if needed. The moment the official charges were filed, the war shifted to a new front: public opinion. Ethan, humiliated and furious, took to social media. He wrote a long, rambling post on his Instagram, accompanied by a carefully selected smiling photo of him and my mother from years ago. He painted me as a cold, heartless monster. "I can't believe what's happening to my family," he wrote. My sister, who we haven't seen in years, suddenly became super rich and decided she was too good for us. All my mom did was ask for a little help with my tuition, and in return my sister called the cops on her. She's trying to send her own mother to jail over some money. Some people will do anything for $1. Please pray for my mom as we fight this horrible, greedy attack from our own family. The post was a masterwork of manipulative half-truths. His friends, people who only knew the curated, wealthy version of his life, flooded the comments with their support. "That's insane. Your sister sounds like a psychopath. Money really does change people. So sorry you're going through this, E. Wow, some daughter. My heart goes out to your mom." I watched the comments roll in, a digital mob armed with hashtags and ignorance. It was a different kind of violation, a public stripping away of my truth. For a moment, the old, familiar sting of being misunderstood, of being cast as the villain in her story, pricked at me. But then I remembered the data. I had the facts. They had a narrative. I told my dad about the post, reading him some of the comments over the phone. He was silent for a long time, and I could hear the slow, simmering anger in his breathing. "Don't you respond, Daisy," he said finally, his voice low and firm. "You don't have to defend yourself to fools. Let me—" I didn't know what he meant, but an hour later, a comment appeared under Ethan's post. It was from my dad. His profile picture was a slightly blurry photo of him holding a large fish, a proud grin on his face. His comment was only one line, simple and devastatingly effective. He wrote, "Money didn't destroy this family. Greed did." The effect was instantaneous and explosive. His comment, so simple and true, cut through all of Ethan's self-pitying noise. People started looking at my dad's profile, seeing the photos of his small cottage, his garden, his fishing trips, the pictures of a simple, hard-working man. His words carried a weight that Ethan's couldn't match. The comment went viral in our small, interconnected world. Friends of friends started sharing it. People who knew our family's history from years ago chimed in, defending my dad. The narrative began to flip. The comments on Ethan's post changed from sympathetic to skeptical. "Wait, who is this? Is this your dad? There's always another side to the story. Something about this doesn't add up. Your dad's comment hits different." The public validation was strangely comforting, but it was my dad's simple, powerful act of defense that meant the world to me. He had seen my truth and had held it up for the world to see, without hesitation. He was, and had always been, my family. The next day, Ethan's Instagram post was gone. A day after that, his entire account was deleted. The public shaming had backfired, and he had retreated into silence. The fallout had been contained. The legal process continued, quietly and efficiently, and my mother eventually took a plea deal that involved probation, a hefty fine, and a court-mandated restraining order that prohibited her or Ethan from contacting me in any way. It was over. I had my receipt. I had my peace. In the months after the legal proceedings ended, a strange quiet settled over my life. The restraining order was a silent, invisible wall that worked perfectly. There were no more calls, no more texts, no more attempts to breach my digital life. My mother and Ethan moved out of state soon after, a fact I learned from a stray piece of forwarded mail that ended up in my box. They had vanished from my life as completely as she had the first time, but this time, it was on my terms. This time it felt like peace, not abandonment. The silence they left behind was clean, but it also left me with a question that echoed in the quiet moments. Why? I understood the greed, but the sheer lack of any maternal instinct, the willingness to harm her own child for money, was something my logical brain couldn't process. I had the what and the how, but the why was a black box. The answer came from a phone call I never expected. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was making dinner when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Is this Daisy Miller?" a hesitant older woman's voice asked. It is. Who's this? Daisy? This is your Aunt Carol, Marie's older sister. I froze, a kitchen knife halfway through chopping an onion. I hadn't spoken to my mother's side of the family since I was a child. They had all silently sided with her when she left, or at the very least had chosen not to get involved. I heard about what happened, she said, her voice filled with a weary sadness. I saw your father's comment online. It got shared around. I wanted to say, I'm so sorry, Daisy, and I wanted you to know that you're not crazy, and you're not wrong. Over the next hour, my aunt unburdened herself of 30 years of family history. She told me stories that filled in the missing data points of my life. She told me my mother had always been this way. As a teenager, she had stolen money from their parents' wallets. In her 20s, she had maxed out their father's credit cards on a shopping spree and then claimed her purse had been stolen. She had a history of borrowing money she never repaid, of charming her way into people's lives and then exploiting their kindness, always blaming everyone else when it all fell apart. Her marriage to Victor was just the latest and most successful of her financial transactions. She doesn't know how to love people, Daisy, Carol said, her voice cracking. She only knows how to value them. She sees people as assets or liabilities. When you were a child, you were a liability. When you became successful, you became an asset she felt entitled to. It was never about you. It was always about her. Listening to her, I felt a profound tectonic shift inside me. All my life, I had carried a secret, painful question. What is wrong with me? Why couldn't my own mother love me? And now I finally had the answer. Nothing was wrong with me. The system wasn't broken on my end. The error, the fundamental flaw, was in her programming. She didn't know how to love me the way I needed because she simply didn't have the capacity. She was incapable. When I hung up the phone, I wasn't sad. I felt a sense of calm, of quiet closure. I had spent so much of my life trying to solve an emotional equation that was, by its very nature, unsolvable. I could finally stop. I didn't need her to love me anymore. I didn't need her apology. I just needed to accept the truth of who she was. With that final piece of data, I began to rebuild. My definition of family, which had been a painful, broken thing, started to reform itself around a new, solid core. My dad. Our bond, already strong, became the central focus of my life. We started having dinner together every Sunday. I helped him build a new deck on his cottage. We went fishing on the lake, sitting in comfortable silence for hours, not needing words to understand each other. He was my family. He was enough. My work also took on a new meaning. I had used my skills to protect myself, and now I wanted to use them to empower others. I started a mentorship program for underprivileged high school girls who were interested in tech. I called it the Receipt Project. I taught them how to code. Yes, but I also taught them about financial literacy, about negotiating salaries, about building their own security so they would never have to depend on anyone who might hurt them. Helping them chase their own success, without guilt or apology, became my therapy. Seeing their confidence grow, watching them build their own futures, healed a part of me I thought would always be broken. I was defining my own life, on my own terms, surrounded by a family of my own choosing, my dad, my friends, and the bright, ambitious young women I was helping to guide. My life wasn't about the ghosts of the past anymore. It was about the solid, tangible present I was building every single day. 1 year later, to the day, I stood on my balcony. It was another cool October evening, the sky a deep, star-dusted purple over the Austin skyline. The air was crisp and the city glowed below, a silent testament to life and energy. I was thinking about how much had changed. The peace I felt was no longer new or fragile. It was a deep, settled part of me. It was the foundation on which I had built my new life. My phone buzzed on the small table beside me. A text from an unknown number. My stomach didn't lurch with anxiety like it would have a year ago. I picked it up with a steady hand. The message was short, stripped of all pretense. We're struggling. Please help your brother. It was her. There was no greeting, no apology, just a demand disguised as a plea. A year had passed and nothing had changed. She was still who she was, but I had changed. I stared at the message, at the words meant to hook into old guilt, old obligations. But there was nothing there for them to hook into anymore. I typed one sentence back, my fingers moving with a calm certainty. I already did. By not letting him learn your ways. I hit send. And then, without waiting for a reply, I blocked the number. I erased it and her from my life with a simple final tap of my finger. That night, I slept without fear for the first time in what felt like my entire life. I slept a deep, dreamless sleep, the kind that truly rests you. Because I finally understood something my dad had tried to teach me ever since I was a kid, watching him pay bills at the kitchen table. Love without boundaries isn't love. It becomes exploitation. Respect has to be earned. And family is more than just blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who protects you instead of trying to profit from you. And sometimes the quietest, most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all. It's refusing to fund the people who tried to break you. It's building a life so full and peaceful that their chaos can't find a single crack to seep through. It's a closed door, a blocked number, a quiet, unbreachable peace. If you've ever been guilt-tripped by family for your success, you're not alone. Tell me in the comments if you've faced something like this, and how you handled it. And hit like and subscribe, because here your story matters.